Hey, movie fans. So I just saw Captain America New World Order. Captain America Brave New World. Yeah, this movie has had a bit of a rough road to get to release. This movie I have wanted to see for a little bit, but I've also been cautious about this movie for the longest time because I really like the character of Sam Wilson. I really like what they did with him when they first introduced him in Captain America Winter Soldier. I like Anthony Mackie a lot as an actor, and I was very curious to see what he would do as the new Captain America. Then literally as soon as cameras started rolling on this project, I got increasingly more concerned. We would hear stories about reshoot after reshoot and production problem after production problem. And with the current state of the MCU, they kind of just changed things a lot. Everything kind of seems like it's a weird state of flux. And then reviews started coming out for Captain America Brave New World that were not overly glowing. So I wouldn't say I had low expectations or high expectations. I didn't really have expectations, period, for Captain America Brave New World. I was just like, I just want a good movie, and this is fine. It is not nearly as bad as the reviews are making it out to be. That being said, looking at all four Captain America movies, this is by far the weakest, but there's enough good things here that I thought it was an enjoyable time, if not an okay time at the box office that you could tell had a lot of issues behind the scenes. But let's dive into all that. So let's start with the positives. We like to focus on the positives here. Anthony Mackie does a fantastic job as the new Captain America. I know some people are always going to look at Steve Rogers as Captain America. Legacy characters come with the territory of comic book world, and I very much like Anthony Mackie as an actor, so I was curious to see what he would bring to the table as Captain America, how he would be different than Steve Rogers as Captain America, and overall, I really like what he does. Do I still like Steve Rogers more? Probably, definitely. But they do a good enough job of showing why Anthony Mackie and Sam Wilson is a different version. It's a different character entirely. Think of it all along the lines of Spider-Man. You got Peter Parker and then you have Miles Morales. They're both Spider-Man, but they are very different personality-wise, but also style and fighting-wise. This Captain America relies much more on the tech because he doesn't take the serum. And that's actually kind of a story beat that they touch on, but they could have touched on more, I think, is this Cap doesn't have the serum. He's just a regular guy, someone to aspire to more than someone to look up to, if that makes sense. And his use of tech, like the wings and the Wakandan tech that he gets, is super cool. It's a different way of fighting than the Steve Rogers style, which was definitely much more of the brawler. I liked it. I liked the high-flying action, particularly in the first third of the movie. The first third of the movie has some really fun and entertaining set pieces, some really fun action and adventure to it. Overall, I really like what Anthony Mackie brought to the table. He's a fun, charismatic lead that I kind of wish had a better script and story to work with, but we'll get more into that in the negatives. I also thought Harrison Ford did a great job as President Thunderbolt Ross. When Harrison Ford doesn't want to try in a movie, he will let you know. He is absolutely trying in this movie, and I will absolutely commend him for that. He is fully invested in this comic book movie. He's having a lot of fun. He's putting forth a really good, compelling character portrayal. Lastly, performance-wise, we have Isaiah Bradley, played by Carl Lumbly, who reprises his role from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which if y'all trust me, you're going to want to revisit Falcon and the Winter Soldier before this movie because there's a lot of that kind of feeds directly into the story. There's a lot of homework that's required for this movie. But Isaiah Bradley was a character that was introduced in that TV series, and I really like what they did with him there, but I also really like what they did with him here. He's a good, interesting character. He's like the mentor figure to Sam. He's just not necessarily a grumpy old curmudgeon. He's just an old guy that has seen some stuff and been through some stuff. And he was well portrayed by Carl Lumbly, who I will always know as Martian Manhunter. He just makes my heart happy. However, getting to the negatives, I mentioned that you kind of have to watch Falcon and Winter Soldier before this because a lot of it's dependent on that. This movie's dependent on a lot of previous knowledge going into this movie. I don't think this is a movie that you can just kind of go in blind, not knowing any other MCU project. This is very heavily dependent on an odd collection of MCU properties, if that makes sense. Falcon and Winter Soldier? Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. The Eternals? Sure, you definitely need to know some Eternal stuff. And there's one other one, but I won't say too much because that might delve into spoiler territory. But there's another very old MCU movie property that I'm like, why are we delving so much time revisiting this era of the MCU? This particular franchise, it felt more like a sequel to a Marvel movie in particular than it did a Captain America movie. A lot of this movie starts to fall apart for me about the halfway point. The first half of the movie, I was like, oh, this actually isn't too bad. I think some of the reviews are overblown. And then the second half kicks in, and it stops being a Captain America movie, and it becomes a sequel to someone else's movie that was a long time ago. And the movie kind of acts like, oh yeah, you just watched this movie recently. You remember this, right? And we're like, no, we don't really care about these characters that you're implementing. At about the halfway point, we meet the villain, because this whole movie is kind of going for the Winter Soldier vibes of government espionage thriller, and we meet the villain who's behind it all. Y'all, I didn't care. This villain reveal was so bad, and the design for said villain is so bad. This villain is laughably bad. Like, he's up there with Malekith from Thor: The Dark World in terms of worst MCU villains of all time. I don't understand how this character was chosen for villainous role in a Captain America movie. It doesn't really make sense. There's better choices, I think. Again, I'm not a scriptwriter, I'm not a story developer. Maybe there's a bigger plan here. But the choices that this movie makes of the characters that they include or the characters that they don't include was just really, really odd and mismatched. There's obviously in the trailer you see there's the Red Hulk. Don't expect a lot of Red Hulk. The Red Hulk is more or less in it for like 5 to 7 minutes, and that's kind of it. So you have these other villainous forces at work and this mystery going on. The mystery element was done a whole lot better in Winter Soldier. They're trying in this one, but you could tell something happened in production. I talked about in the intro, this movie had a lot of production issues. It had a lot of reshoots, a lot of rewrites, and straight up recastings. Like, some characters we know for a fact were not in the original version of the script that were in this movie. And the reshot scenes are so noticeable. The script is so messy because of these reshoots. You could tell something happened. The narrative was supposed to go in different directions. And I think the villain definitely suffers for that. And I think the movie as a whole suffers because the first half of it is okay. It's a Captain America, a Sam Wilson Captain America centered story. And then the second half, without delving too much into spoilers, takes the spotlight away from him and kind of goes in a different direction for a MCU franchise that has not really been in the forefront. Like, Marvel has not really teased it or set it up. It's like, hey, do you remember this thing from a really long time ago? And the narrative kind of crumbles from that point on. Like I said, I am a fan of Sam Wilson. I was excited to see what his Captain America would bring to the table, how he was different from Steve Rogers. And we get that a little bit, but as a plot point, it is really underbaked and really underdeveloped. I get that that was more of the narrative for the Falcon and Winter Soldier, but I thought that could have been expanded upon more. There's more to the story that I think could have been interesting, but the script isn't particularly strong. And like I said, you could tell when things were taken out or new things were added. It's just a messy story. There's a good plot in there somewhere, and there's a good Captain America movie somewhere for Sam Wilson, but I don't think this was it, and I'm wondering just what all happened production-wise. What was the original version of this story supposed to be, and why did you pick the villains that you did for this movie? I'm so curious about that side of things. I know things are up in the air in Marvel right now with Kang and everything else, but oh boy, what was happening here? Like, it's not, again, this is not a bad movie, but it's also not a great movie either. It is clearly a victim of some behind the scenes tampering, which, without giving too much away, if you're seeing this movie in theaters, or you plan on seeing this movie in theaters, you honestly do not have to stay for the post-credits. There's only one post-credit scene, and it is, in my opinion, the weakest and worst post-credit scene in the entire MCU so far. I know we've had some gag ones, like the Captain America training videos at the end of Spider-Man. I would have rather had one of those than what we got. The end credits for this is so bland and generic and makes me think that they don't fully have a plan at the current moment, that they purposely left this so vague that it could mean anything. Like I said, I wanted this to be good just because I like Sam Wilson, I like Anthony Mackie, and I like some of the individual performances in this. He is charismatic. The movie plays to Sam Wilson's strengths, which I think is really, really good. But the script and the story behind him just are not worthy of the Captain America name. They're going for a Winter Soldier vibe, but it's not written nearly as well as Winter Soldier. And at the end of the day, not disappointed just because I didn't have any expectations one way or the other. This movie is fine. Could have been a lot worse, but also deserved to be a whole lot better. But what do you guys think? Have you seen Captain America Brave New World? Am I overreacting? Did you think it was better than I did? Did you think it was worse than I did? In the terms of the overall MCU, where would you rank this movie if you've seen it? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below, as I like hearing from you guys. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Stay sharp, movie guys and gals.